Secretary of State Mike Pompeo joins us now to give us the latest on these threats that we're hearing from Iran about the new round of sanctions. And he joins us now. Mr. Secretary, good to have you with us.
Hello, Laura. Good to be with you.
So what do you make of that comment from the foreign minister?
So it's not the first time that Mr. Zarif has made these kinds of threats. But the real decision-making there isn't him. It's the Ayatollah. That's who our counterparty is. That's who's making all of these decisions. You referred to the assassination attempts all throughout Europe. They're not just the couple from these past months. This has been going on for some time. They're the world's largest state sponsor of terror. We saw that their nuclear program continues to present risks to the United States. It's why the president made the right decision in withdrawing from the JCPOA. We ask for one simple thing, right? We want the Islamic Republic of Iran to behave like a normal nation. If they'll do that, we're happy to allow them to enter the community of nations. But we have to continue to apply pressure, and on Monday of the week ahead, we will put back in place sanctions that will be very severe on the leadership of Iran, and we hope that will convince them to change their ways.
Mr. Secretary, you have a cold. I can hear it.
Just a bit.
Oh, you poor guy. Well, you're flying all over You're flying all over creation.
I'll be just fine. No sympathy needed, Laura. But thank you for your concern.
I know. But as a mother, I worry about all my friends who are sick. So thank you for playing sick here with us. So right now, the Europeans there's developing and persistent split in opinion on what to do with this Iranian menace. Where is Germany today, given the fact that Merkel is out as her party leader? She's in her last term. Clearly, opposition forces in Germany, more populist, anti-migration political elements.
Yeah. Laura, so far the German government has not changed its position. It still wants to stay inside of the JCPOA. But nearly every German company, folks with real money at risk, have made the opposite decision. They have fled. They have left. They have decided they are not going to run through the Iranian sanctions that President Trump will put back in place on Monday. And there are other countries in Europe who are with us. And I am convinced that over time, all of the European countries will come to see that Iran is indeed the force creating instability in the Middle East, and that we must apply all possible pressure to push back against that to fix it.
So the sanctions go in place on Monday, correct?
Yes, ma'am, Monday.
Okay. And they'll feel them immediately, or will it take a little time to settle in?
So, Laura, they're already feeling them, but as the days go on, the pressure will increase. We will substantially drop the amount of crude oil, their primary revenue source, that they can ship around the world. Treasury will put back in place sanctions on financial institutions there. And we hope that the sanctions we put on individuals and in other places will convince the leadership. We want the Iranian people to be successful. We want this to be a successful country. We want to restore democracy there. We think the Iranian people want that same thing. And so our aim is not to harm the Iranian people, but to change the behavior, the malign activity of this regime.
Just going back to Germany, boy, have Merkel's fortunes changed. Obviously, she'll be finishing up her last term, but she's been there for, I guess, 13 years or so. And she's leaving ahead of her party. Well, how will that change our dealings with Germany in the near term? And what do you see as the political climate in Europe with the rise of Salvini and the challenges the EU is facing?
So we have many places where the Europeans work alongside us. We clearly have some where we don't share the same view. The president has been direct with respect to the Europeans taking increased responsibility for their own security. That makes perfect sense. Most European countries understand that. The primary folks who need to defend against the risk that Russia creates reside in Europe, not in America. And so I'm hopeful as each of these governments evaluates this and sees that America is with them. We're happy to assist them, but they have the primary responsibility. We hope that each of these governments will come to see that in the way that President Trump has so clearly laid out.
CNBC reported yesterday, Mr. Secretary, that North Korea is reportedly preparing nuclear and missile sites for international inspectors. What can you tell us about I know you're going to go meet with your North Korean counterpart in just a matter of days, but what's the latest from North Korea?
So I can't say much about what's taking place on the ground, but I can make clear that when I was with Chairman Kim now 3.5 weeks ago, he committed to allowing American inspectors to come look at 2 significant sites, and we hope to get them there before too long. It's one of the things I'll speak with my counterpart next week about. And then we do have the intention of President Trump and Chairman Kim getting together before too long, hopefully early in the next year, where we can make a substantial breakthrough in taking down the nuclear threat from North Korea. We're still happy that they haven't conducted a nuclear test in an awfully long time. They haven't launched a missile in an awfully long time, but there's a lot of work which remains. And Chairman Kim has made clear to me, just as plain as I'm speaking to you, Laura, that he has the intention to denuclearize, and we're going to do everything we can to assist him in following through on that commitment.
I want to move to China, Mr. Secretary, because we've seen in recent weeks nothing that's surprising to you or me, because we've been following this issue of Chinese stealing our intellectual property and attempting to bribe foreign officials, including here at different times in the United States, business officials, to gain access to technology, critical technology in manufacturing, aviation, and so forth. Now we have this chip maker ban in place that is garnering a lot of attention, and it's trying to. I guess we're trying to target that state-owned chip maker in China over national security concerns. How is that going to fit into our overall aggressive stance against this expansive Chinese behemoth?
Laura, China is probably, over the long term, the biggest national security challenge that faces our country. You saw the indictments of 10 Chinese persons for the alleged theft of intellectual property, aviation-related intellectual property. This is a story that's been going on for years. This is the first administration that has been prepared to push back against China, and we're doing so on all fronts. So where the semiconductor piece fits in is it's part of a mosaic of our strategic effort to push back against this continued Chinese effort. It begins with trade. President has demanded fair and reciprocal trade with China. We've demanded that they not steal our intellectual property. We talk with some frequency about the enormous violation of religious freedom that's taking place against the Uyghurs in China. We're very worried that China will put the people in many countries around the world, in Africa and Central America and Latin America, in a debt trap that will cause those countries decades of pain. It is a multi-pronged effort on behalf of all of the United States government at the President's direction to convince China to behave like a normal nation on commerce and with respect to the rules of international law.
Yeah, I know you have to go, Mr. Secretary, but just so people understand this, our trade policy with China has had real effect inside China. They already have structural weaknesses within China at large, but they had the weakest manufacturing growth in more than 2 years in China. And the yuan has slid, manufacturing stalled, and their ambitions as a result have been affected, but they're still lofty. And we do finally have an administration who's seeing this with eyes wide open. Mr. Secretary, we really appreciate your joining us, and best of luck on that next meeting with your North Korean counterpart, and get better, get well, okay?
Thank you, Laura.
All right, you take care. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on your Healthy Radio Addiction.